This next video series is for you. If you are a science writer who has ever struggled with conveying the importance of their work in their writing. This can come in several different forms. Maybe you know that the journals that you're submitting to are a good fit for your work, but you keep getting rejected. Maybe you're not able to get any grants funded, especially when you have people working on similar things around you who are also getting that work funded. If this sounds like you, this is the series of videos for you. So in this series, I'm so excited to cover with you how to convey the importance of your work in your scientific papers and your grant proposals. This first video is going to walk you through the major problems and mistakes that I see, the traps that people fall into when trying to write up their work. So this is where you're going to get stuck if you're going to miss the importance somewhere. Then, every future video in this series, I'm going to take one of those points, one of those sticking points, and I'm going to break it down for you in excruciating detail, showing you exactly how to tell in your writing if you are making these mistakes or having these problems, and then show you exactly what you're going to need to do and give you the formulas you need to fix it. So if this sounds like what you're interested in, get ready and let's get started. So I know we're supposed to be talking about conveying the importance of your science writing, but let's start here with something that hopefully a lot of you already remember. Do you remember this dress, this internet phenomenon that hit the internet a couple years ago and became such a popular image because people were really split on what color this dress was and nobody seemed to be able to decide. So about half the people who look at this image see a black and blue dress, and about half the people who look at this image see a white and gold dress. And so, we can debate this forever, we can talk about this forever, but the point is that it doesn't actually matter. Half the people out there are seeing one thing, and half the people out there are seeing something else. And at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter who's right or who's wrong. It's just sort of understanding that people perceive things and people see things differently than we do. And the reason that I bring up this very specific example is because if we can't even get people to agree on the color of a dress in a photograph on the internet, how are we going to be able to get them to see and agree with us that the work we're publishing is important, or the work that we're applying for funding for is worth funding and is worth paying for? And basically, this wraps into the biggest mistake I see that people make when conveying this importance in their papers and their grants. And it's basically forgetting that people think differently than we do. Forgetting that people come into our papers with a completely different set of biases, interpretations, background, experiences, priorities from ours. They will have had different trainings. They will have learned different things over their time in science. They're going to have different priorities for what should be focused on, maybe even within your own paper. They're going to have different ideas of what you should be working on and why. And so they are never going to see things the way that we do. And we need to account for that. We need to adjust our scientific writing to make it such that it doesn't matter if people have these different biases or whatever. They're still going to be able to understand what we want them to understand. So what we're going to do instead is make sure that we spell out for our reader exactly what we want them to learn in terms that they're going to be familiar with and comfortable with, able to understand and interpret. So like I mentioned previously, a major problem that I see with scientists and science writing is writing paragraphs or introductions or whatever of our papers, of our proposals, and leaving out some of these directly stated points, assuming that they're going to be implied and the reader is going to understand them. But this is almost never the case. Again, every reader coming in with their different set of background, different experiences, nobody is going to interpret this the way that you want them to. So what we need to do, what our responsibility is as a science writer, is to come in and make that very clear and very direct. So it is impossible to miss. It's impossible to be interpreted in a different way. Very often you might see a reader coming in assuming the importance of your work, but assuming something that's not nearly to the level of importance that your work should be, and trying to rank your paper a little lower maybe than where you would like it to be. So we're going to work here on how to include the two sets of very important direct statements throughout your research papers, throughout your grant proposals, to make this clear. The first thing, and one of the biggest issues that I see in conveying importance in both papers and proposals, is missing direct statements of existing gaps in the field that led up to the development of this work or this research project. It is going to be very challenging to make somebody understand the need for your work, the importance of your work, if they do not understand what gaps existed previously in the field. And so in the next video in this series, we're going to break this down in depth. I'm going to show you exactly which parts of your papers and grants should convey or should talk about the gap in the field. I'm going to show you how to see if you have sufficient mention of the gap in the field in your papers, and then show you how to insert this and exactly where to insert this throughout your papers and grant proposals to make sure that your reader is not missing this key aspect they need to determine the importance of your work. And second, the next biggest problem I see here related to direct versus implied statements is having those statements of the importance, those statements of impact be implied and not direct. That's right. One way we're going to have people understand the importance of our work is tell them the importance of our work. So here I'm going to do the exact same thing as for gaps. I'm going to break down exactly where in your papers and proposals you should have these direct statements. I'm going to show you how to see if you have them in your papers and proposals, and if not, no stress, because I'm going to tell you exactly how to add these in yours to make sure that this is not missing for you. So now I'm going to move into the second category of mistakes I see here in conveying the importance. And this is instead of before, where it was direct versus implied statements and writers often don't say things directly. Now we're going to talk about your readers' interpretations or their direct interpretations. And so this problem just sort of comes in with remembering that our readers have different biases, have different priorities, and they're not going to place the same weight on things that we do. So here's a quick example to show why this matters. I was teaching a workshop and I had a student come in who was writing a paper on developing new radar-based methods for bird migration. Now, for me, I don't work in bird migration. I don't work in radar. I don't work in climate change. I don't work in any of these fields that might be related to birds, migration, any of this. And so when he was starting this paper and he was starting this introduction with statements of there is a need for new radar-based methods for detecting bird migration patterns, I was like, is there? If I got this paper on my desk as an editor, I would have no idea that there is a need for this. And so by starting this paper, already assuming that people are going to realize that there is a need for these new radar-based methods for studying bird migration is already in and of itself a big assumption, because a lot of readers are not going to understand that there is a need for this type of research and this type of work. So what we need to do instead is make sure that this is spelled out clearly for the reader so that this is obvious to the reader, because otherwise we tend to fall back on the default stance as humans, which is if I don't see how this is important for me, I assume that this is not important. Okay, that's not true at all. We all probably know that. But the thing is, that's kind of how human brains work. If we can't see why something is important, we assume that it isn't. And so we want to take that whole aspect away and make sure that everybody is going to know exactly why our work is important. Back to that example that I gave you on bird migration, we went through some exercises here in this workshop trying to dig in and find out the why we were doing this type of work to give a bigger, more overarching reason. Eventually, we got to a point here in this workshop where I kept asking him why. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this? And he eventually got to a point where he just went, oh, well, studying bird migration patterns can give us an idea for climate change. And I was like, there we go. There it is. This is how we want to put this into context for our reader. Now, at this point, I always have somebody who asks a question or raises their hand and says, hey, but not everything is about climate change. Not everything is curing cancer. Okay, yes, that is absolutely true. And let's be honest, very rarely is any one of our papers or grants curing cancer or fixing climate change or doing anything that could be even considered a visible, appreciable step in that direction. But at the end of the day, even if we are contributing one piece of a 1 million piece puzzle, so you can barely see the contribution of our little paper in our little niche in this world, the thing is, that's still what the puzzle is. We still want to give the reader an idea of what the whole entire overarching puzzle looks like, and not just one teeny weeny little corner. Because until we are able to convey the whole picture to the reader, they are never going to see the importance. So what we want to do here is make sure we paint a picture of the entire puzzle that we're building, that we're working on for the reader. And so the next major issue, or the third thing that we're going to talk about in this video series, is when the work is insufficiently related to the reader. And so again, going back to this example about bird migration patterns, without knowing that this might relate to climate change, I could not come up with any single reason why this was important work. I had no idea why this should be studied, why this should be funded, why this might want to be published in high-level journals. Insufficiently relating your paper to the reader is going to make it challenging for anybody other than an expert in your field to know why you are doing this work. So this is what we're going to work on in the third problem in this video series. We're going to talk about how to make sure your work is sufficiently related to the reader, where you want to put this information, how much information you want to include, and put this all together for you for your paper. Finally, the final and last way that the importance can be missing in your paper is going to be a slightly more nuanced view of what I just explained. But instead of looking at this on a grand scale of the whole paper and why you did this research, very often the importance of your work is difficult to determine in a research paper because we do not provide the reader enough context throughout the results section to be able to follow along with our logic, see what we did, see how our experiments fit together and flow together. And without that logic, without that, continuity in your experiments, without making sure that every single step of the way as you're explaining what you did, that your reader is still on board with you, that they still know why you did what you did, it's going to be also here easy for the reader to miss the importance of your experiments. And if they're missing the importance of a couple key experiments throughout the paper, they're probably going to miss the importance of the paper as a whole. So the fourth and final problem that we're going to walk through in this video series will be how to write your results sections, how to explain your experiments, such that you are certain that there is enough context there that every reader is going to be able to follow along and know exactly what you did and why throughout this paper. So if this all sounds good, and if you're ready to learn about how to make sure the importance is never missing in your paper, then stick around for the rest of the video series. Like I said, we're going to be having one video come out for each one of these problems, breaking them down in depth, showing you how to find out if you have this problem in your papers or grants, and showing you exactly with formulas, step-by-step instructions, how to fix this for yourself. If you're really impatient and you don't want to wait for these videos to be released on YouTube, you can also check out the link below for the blog post where this is already all there and all typed up for you. Otherwise, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, especially because then you will be notified when the next videos are released. So thank you for joining me so far today, and happy writing.